The envelope was older than the war itself, yellowed like bone and curled at the edges, hidden beneath the rotten floorboards of a collapsed farmhouse that had once stood on the front line of a forgotten battlefield. Its faded handwriting trembled across the paper with a message meant not for one person, but for anyone who might someday find it. To the one who reads this, remember us. The letter had never been stamped, never been folded for delivery, and never been sent. It had waited silently for decades beside 12 others, sealed together inside a tin box tied with strips of a medic's old bandage. All were written by the same hand, Sergeant Elias Voronin, and all carried words that had never reached the people they were meant for, yet refused to be silenced by time. Before the war, Elias had been a schoolteacher in a quiet river town where children learned history without ever imagining they might become part of it. He loved teaching the stories of ancient empires and long-ended wars, always telling his students that the worst conflicts were behind humanity. But when the borders collapsed and conscription orders arrived, he traded chalk for a rifle, a classroom for muddy trenches. On the day he reported for duty, he bought a small notebook from a roadside stall, slipping it into his pack as a promise to himself that he would never let the war erase the man he had once been. At first, he wrote letters to his wife, describing training exercises, the freezing nights, and how much he missed the rhythm of home. But as communication lines broke and mail never reached the front, he kept writing anyway, not sending his words, only storing them, because writing was the only reminder that his voice still mattered. By autumn, his platoon was stationed near the broken bridge line, a half-destroyed crossing over a river that no one could fully control. Bombardments never fully stopped, and the farmland around the trenches turned into a wasteland of water, filled craters and scorched earth. The horizon vanished behind perpetual smoke. Days blurred into one another until time lost meaning altogether. Every night, by flickering lantern light, Elias wrote more letters to his infant daughter who would not yet recognize his face, to former students who might or might not still exist, and even to the brother he hadn't spoken to for years. In one letter he confessed, "War doesn't kill the body first, it kills the future. A man begins to die the moment he stops believing he'll go home." During those months, he befriended a terrified teenage conscript named Luca. The boy carried a malfunctioning rifle that jammed constantly, a defect no one bothered to fix. He flinched at every blast and barely slept. Other soldiers avoided or mocked him, but Elias sat beside the boy during quiet hours and handed him the notebook he once used for training notes. He told Luca to write anything: fear, anger, hope, it didn't matter. After hours of staring at the page, Luca finally wrote a single sentence: "I don't want to be brave. I just want to live." 2 weeks later, during a sudden ambush, Luca's rifle jammed again. He never made it back. That night, Elias wrote a new letter, not to family, not to the future, but to Luca himself, apologizing for a war that demanded courage from boys who just wanted to survive. The longer the war dragged on, the more Elias wrote after patrols, after losses, and after moments when silence pressed harder than shellfire. His letters shifted from correspondence to testimony, chronicling faces rather than strategies, names rather than numbers. "They will remember statistics," one letter read, "but statistics do not bleed. Men do." Each completed note was folded carefully and sealed into the tin box, hidden beneath the farmhouse floor, a silent archive of grief that no one beside Elias knew existed. The war taught soldiers to preserve only what kept them alive: food, ammunition, medical supplies, and so no one ever questioned the extra weight of words he carried. November brought the most violent night the sector had ever seen, the Black Barrage. The sky disappeared behind burning clouds while shells hammered the earth without pause. The farmhouse shelter collapsed under repeated blasts, trapping men beneath shattered beams. Elias clawed survivors free until blood soaked through his gloves. Then came the final order: hold the crossroads at any cost. Retreat would abandon dozens of soldiers already pinned down. Elias volunteered to stay behind. Earlier that morning, before any warning, before the sky turned to fire, he had written one last letter. It wasn't addressed to family. It wasn't meant for anyone specific. It was meant for the unknown future. In that final note, he wrote, "If you are reading this, then I did not make it home. I am not afraid of dying, I am afraid of being forgotten. Speak our names even if you never knew them. Tell someone that we were here." That night, as the bombardment intensified, Elias stayed at the crossroads with only his rifle, his radio, and the echo of unsent letters. At 02:17 hours, his radio signal cut out mid-transmission. No retreat order was received. No survivor reported seeing him leave his position. Official records later listed him simply as killed in action, body unrecovered. 4 decades passed before anyone uncovered the farmhouse ruins. Construction workers investigating unexploded ordnance broke through the rotted flooring and found the rusted ammunition crate. Inside was the tin box still sealed, containing all 13 letters written in the same steady, careful handwriting. Historians tracked Elias through military rosters and handwriting comparison. They contacted what remained of his family. His wife had died years earlier. His infant daughter, the child he wrote to from muddy trenches, was now a grandmother. When she read the letters for the first time, she whispered through tears. He never stopped talking to us even when no one could answer. The collection was published under one title, The Last Hidden Letters from a Fallen Soldier. Veterans who read the pages recognized their own unspoken memories inside the words. Schools taught the letters not as war history, but as human history. Documentaries formed around his life not to celebrate battlefield heroism, but to honor emotional resilience. Readers were most stunned not by descriptions of battle, but by tenderness written amid devastation. One letter read, "War creates monsters, but it also reveals the fragile miracle of caring." Stories poured in from forgotten soldiers worldwide. Thousands of unsent letters followed Elias's into an archive dedicated to voices long silenced, men who now dared to write because one soldier had taught them how. Years later, an elderly man contacted the archives. He had recognized the name of the fearful boy mentioned in Elias's writings. Luca was his nephew. The family had never known how he died, only that he never returned. The uncle visited the quiet grassy field where the battlefield once stood, and stood alone in the wind, reading Elias's letter to Luca aloud. For the first time in decades, the boy's name was spoken where he had fallen. Today, near the crossroads Elias once defended, stands a small museum that houses the collected letters, not monuments of glory, but reminders of humanity behind the uniforms. Inside a glass case remain the original 13 envelopes. One letter has never been opened, its purpose preserved by curators who believe the words inside belong to the future more than the past. On the front of the yellowed envelope are faded words, "For the stranger who finds this," and maybe that stranger is you. Because wars never truly end for those who were there. They still write to the future to us, waiting for their voices to be heard. And as long as we listen to their letters, the fallen are never truly silent.